Hi there students, in this video I'm going to talk a little bit about the Reformation in France, and then I'm going to talk about the 30 Years' War, how it's part of the fallout from the Protestant Reformation. So I've talked a little bit about the Reformation in Germany with Martin Luther. I talked about the Reformation in Switzerland with Zwingli and Calvin. And we talked about a lot about the Reformation in England with Henry VIII. We talked about Spain and Italy and the Counter-Reformation, Council of Trent, Jesuit order. One major country in Europe we haven't talked about so far is the Kingdom of France. France, of course, for the second half of the 14th century and into the 15th century, is caught up in the Hundred Years' War, a war that it wins, but a war that devastates the country. And after this war, it takes a while for France to rebuild, but it does rebuild at the beginning of the 16th century. And then we start to find Calvinist missionaries coming out of Switzerland, returning to France. Remember, Calvin himself was French. Coming to France and beginning to make some converts. And Calvinists in France are called Huguenots, so keep that in mind. French Calvinists are called Huguenots. And you start to enter this period of civil war in France for a couple of reasons. First, you have a series of royal tragedies where several kings die through accidents or because they're sick, die very quickly one after another. The new king is just a child. His mother, Catherine de' Medici, an Italian princess, is the real ruler, and so politically the kingdom is destabilized. Religiously, the kingdom is also destabilized. You have a minority of Huguenots, but a growing minority. Some people estimate around 10% of the population. That's a significant percentage in a society that previously had been basically united on religious issues. And in a society where Catholicism was the official religion of the kingdom, and in a society where heresy was not permitted. And so you start to have conflicts between the Huguenots and the Catholics, between different groups of different political factions as well. And so France in the 16th century becomes very bloody. There are a series of massacres that take place. There's ongoing agitation between all these different groups. And in the middle of it, because of the way so many kings have died so quickly, the new king, Henry IV, turns out to be a Huguenot. And this is really disturbing for at least the hardline Catholics in France. There are Huguenots in France who really like Henry IV, like the fact that he's a Huguenot. There are some Catholics in France who, they don't particularly like that Henry IV is a Huguenot, but for them that doesn't disbar him from being king. And then there is also a significant portion of Catholics who reject Henry IV as king because this is supposed to be a Catholic kingdom in their eyes, and he's a Protestant. And so there's a civil war about that as well. In the end, Henry IV manages to end the Civil War through a couple of measures. First, he converts to Catholicism. And most people are pretty skeptical that this was a religiously motivated conversion. But this is a way to get even pretty hardline Catholics to accept him. They don't particularly like him, but they're willing to accept him and not fight against him anymore. And secondly, he issues the Edict of Nantes in 1598. And through this edict, he says any form of Christianity is allowed to be publicly practiced in the Kingdom of France. This hadn't been the case before. Before, it had been the case Catholicism was the official religion of the kingdom. That was what you were allowed to practice publicly. And so this is a big change, a change where you see a government just kind of stepping away from deciding a particular religion is right or wrong, or promoting a particular religion or a particular form of Christianity, and instead promoting this very kind of laissez-faire model in the relationship between government and religion. But what's interesting is that at the same time as he's promoting this very laissez-faire model with Henry IV and with his successor, Louis XIII, we see a focus on centralizing power in the Kingdom of France, trying to weaken the power of nobles and other major stakeholders in the kingdom in order that they can prevent future civil wars and that the king and the palace can dominate the kingdom, can properly control the kingdom and prevent further turmoil. And so this is how the Reformation in France plays out. And this is the context leading into the 30 Years' War. So we've talked about a lot of conflicts associated with the Protestant Reformation. 30 Years' War is the one that is definitely associated with the Reformation, or is definitely part of the fallout of the Protestant Reformation across Europe. And so in the PowerPoint, I kind of sketch out the different statuses of the different kingdoms in Europe before the 30 Years' War. You have this really powerful Spanish Empire ruled by the Habsburg dynasty. You have, and it's Catholic, and you have the Holy Roman Empire, which is a patchwork of a bunch of different states, and is also ruled by another branch of the Habsburg family, or at least dominated by another branch of the Habsburg family, and is Catholic. You have France, which is Catholic, but feels threatened by the Catholic Habsburgs, and so they're going to kind of chart their own course. And then you have England, which is Protestant, and you have all the different parts of the Holy Roman Empire that are Protestant because their rulers are Protestant. Remember, that was the agreement at the end of the war between Charles V and the Lutherans. If your local ruler is Protestant, you can be Protestant. And you can see how, like I said at the time, that's only really a band-aid. That's not going to provide a lasting solution. What happens if most people in your region are Catholic, but your ruler is Protestant? Is it okay to make Protestantism the official religion? What happens if your ruler converts? So your ruler was initially a Catholic and then they decide they want to be a Protestant. Does that mean they get to switch the official religion to Protestantism? And so there's growing discontent about this band-aid solution from the Treaty of Augsburg. And there is a new Holy Roman Emperor, Ferdinand II. Ferdinand II, who has been educated by the Jesuits, who's a product of the Counter-Reformation, who has stated that his goal is to make the whole of the Holy Roman Empire Catholic. So he says, we've said the religion of the ruler should be the religion of the region. Let's forget the local rulers. I'm the ruler of the whole Holy Roman Empire, so we're all going to be Catholic. And Protestant regions of the empire rebel against this, and this is what brings about the 30 Years' War. And the 30 Years' War takes place in 3 phases. First phase is the Bohemian phase. Protestants in Bohemia rebel against Ferdinand II and the Austrian Habsburgs. Spanish Habsburgs support the Austrian Habsburgs. Different Protestant German states and English volunteers fight to support the Bohemians. And the Habsburgs are successful. They defeat the Bohemians, and in the end, the Bohemians end up converting to Catholicism. And then we enter the second phase. The second phase is the Scandinavian phase. And this phase is interesting because this is the point where the war starts to change course. It starts to stop being just a war that's about religious issues, Catholics against Protestants, and it starts to become a political conflict. But for the Scandinavian phase, it's going to be partly religious and partly political. It's partly religious because the Danes and the Swedes who are fighting against the Habsburgs are fighting against them for religious reasons. And that's Catholics against Protestants. But it's political because the money they're receiving to fund their armies is coming from the French, who are Catholic, but who are supporting the Protestant side because they want to further their own political interests. And they see their own political interests as vested in defeating the Habsburgs, breaking the power of the Habsburgs, who rule Spain and Austria. And the Habsburgs are able to defeat the Danes and the Swedes. And it's at this point that we enter the third phase of the war, the French phase. And this is the totally political phase, where the French enter the war under their own banner, in their own name, to fight against the Habsburgs, basically for political reasons, or almost entirely for political reasons. And the Habsburgs are pretty exhausted at this point. French win some victories, but they can't totally conquer the Habsburgs, and in the end, the two sides have to come to a peace treaty, the Peace of Westphalia. And this brings the 30 Years' War to an end. What are some of the effects of the 30 Years' War? First, that this dream that the Catholic Counter-Reformation had of reuniting the Holy Roman Empire as totally Catholic, that's not going to be possible. The Protestant parts of German-speaking Europe will remain Protestant. In particular, a region called Prussia in the northeast of the Germanic-speaking area of Europe, which starts to emerge as a leader of Protestant German-speaking peoples, in the way that Austrians are leaders of the Catholic German-speaking peoples. So the empire is going to be bifurcated. Spain is weakened. England is an emerging force outside of England, and France is the most powerful country in Europe. So in this sense, the French have achieved their goals. Some other social and cultural results of the 30 Years' War. 8 million people have died, either through war or through disease, famine that are associated with war. Germany, the region where most of the war has been fought, has been devastated. 25 to 40% of its population, we estimate, have died from these different causes: war, disease, famine. And publicly, people have continued to perceive this as a religious war, even though, as I've explained, it's not a religious war. But people have continued to perceive it that way. And so there's a growing unease about religious disputes leading to religious wars. That seems to be wrong. And that maybe religion shouldn't have a public role in, yes, that religion shouldn't have a public role in society if it's going to lead to these conflicts. So that's the way in which the 30 Years' War kind of brings an end to the period of the Protestant Reformation. The violence that's associated with the Reformation, and unease about the role of religion in society that's associated with the Reformation. Hope it was helpful, and I hope you enjoy the course this week.